Number 1. At the time of this story, I was 20 years old. I was working part-time in the cosmetic department at a drugstore, working mostly evenings, being a student and all. I was never overly afraid of being there at night. It wasn't a bad neighborhood at all, upper middle class, and there were always at least 4 people working in the store at a time. However, regardless of the neighborhood we were in, idiots will be idiots, and the theft rate in our store was at an all-time high, and it was usually targeted in the evenings. This company was a fantastic company to work for, and they genuinely cared about our safety and, of course, the products that were going missing. So they hired a security company to cover the store in the evenings, mostly for the cosmetic department. I should also mention that although there were always other employees in the store, the cosmetics department is pretty secluded, and there was only ever one employee, usually a female, scheduled in the department at a time. Because of this, the company of a security guard was definitely welcome to help pass the time on a long, quiet night. I worked 4 evenings a week, and another girl covered the other evenings, and it was for the most part the same schedule each week. There were a few different guards that would come to our store, but on most occasions it was this one male, I'd guess around 25 years old, not unattractive, and very friendly. Let's call him Mike. Mike would come in his uniform and post at our counter and basically scare away potential thieves by doing just that. Quite often, we would chit-chat and pass the time, having idle conversation. I am very talkative, pretty much an open book, and sometimes too forthcoming with personal information. I began noticing that on my shifts, it was only ever Mike on duty, and asked him about it, to which he replied,
"Yeah, you're just stuck with me now. Everyone else has other postings."
That was entirely possible. I didn't think much of it. That is, until I went into the store on one of my nights off to pick up something and saw that there was a different guard there with the other evening employee. We'll call her Sarah. I said hello to Sarah and the other guard and said, "Oh, it must be Mike's night off," to which the other guard replied,
"Mike only works Sunday through Wednesday."
Well, that caused a little lump in my throat. That was my exact schedule. Has to be a coincidence, right? 20-year-old naive me thought so. On with my life I went, not worried about a thing. The things that followed were a series of minor creepy encounters with Mike. Running into him at the movie theater in my town when I knew from previous conversations that he lived in the town 20 minutes away, which had its own theater with the same showings. Having him show up at my work on a day that I took an extra shift, in uniform, claiming he was on his lunch break, and now gets his prescriptions at my store instead of the one near his house due to better service. I asked the pharmacy tech if he had a prescription filled, and she said no. The next thing still gives me the chills, not in a good way, and is when I started being not so friendly to this guy. I also want to make it very clear that on many occasions, while having conversations with Mike, I had mentioned my awesome boyfriend. There was no way he thought I could be available or interested in him. After a vacation that Mike took with some friends, he was back to working the same shifts as me at the drugstore, and I was remaining neutral towards him, still having conversation to pass the time. He asked if I'd like to see some photos he had taken from his vacation. It was a road trip, so he had a ton of scenery pictures, etc. I said sure and took his phone from him. He said,
"Just keep swiping left to see all the pics."
I'm scrolling through and one swipe too many, and I'm looking at a full-blown dick pic. Of course, I kind of jump, stutter a bit, and say, "Oh, whoops, I think I went a little bit too far here," and pass the phone back to him, thinking it's a total accident, and he clearly sent that to a girlfriend or something. Except he isn't embarrassed at all. He replies with,
"I was hoping you'd see that."
And the creepiest grin I had ever seen. Chills again just typing this. I was all of a sudden very busy and didn't have time to chit-chat that evening. The next morning, I placed a call to the company he worked for and explained to them that I thought he might have a crush on me and I was feeling slightly uncomfortable. I told them I didn't want to cause a scene and was hoping they would just change his location or at the very least his schedule. I sometimes have too much compassion and didn't want to get him in trouble and was worried maybe he thought I would like his dick pic for some reason and that it was my mistake. Like I said, sometimes I overshare and maybe he got the wrong idea. I was thrilled the next night when I went in and there was another guard at the store. I was grateful that his supervisor had listened to my concerns. However, when myself and the rest of the closing crew locked up for the evening, we heard a car's engine start up just as we left the store. When I looked for where the sound was coming from, it was in the corner of the mall parking lot, which was completely empty and dark, and I felt a knot form in my stomach when it was the same vehicle that Mike drove. I had seen him pull in multiple times as the front of our store by the cosmetics department is all windows. Although I couldn't quite make out the exact color of the car, I was convinced it was the same. I was trying so hard to convince myself it was just someone with the same vehicle also closing up for the night. The car drove out of the parking lot, which made me feel better. When I got to my car, I noticed a note under my wiper blade. It read,
"I'm so sad that my location got changed. We'll try to come back to your store as soon as I can. In the meantime, let's get together,"
with his phone number. I am basically puking in my mouth from nerves at this point. I jump into my car and get the hell out of there. The next day, I called Mike's supervisor again, this time told him the whole story, and asked that he relay the message that I am not interested and to please leave me alone. I also told my store manager, who was a pretty awesome guy, who responded with an, "Oh, hell no," and placed a call to the supervisor as well, asking that Mike be advised not to step foot back on our store's premises. I didn't see or hear from Mike for a few weeks after. Thought I was in the clear. I hadn't told my boyfriend anything at this point. It was a fairly new relationship, and I didn't want him to be weirded out by it. Weeks later, and I am barely thinking about Mike and his forceful advances when it is a very rainy evening and I'm at work setting up a new collection. When it is raining and dark, it is very hard to see out into the parking lot of the store. Basically, all you can see in the windows is the reflection of yourself in the store. I was over by the windows, bent over, putting some things on a bottom shelf, when a car honked outside of the window. Of course, I looked up to see what was happening, and as I did, over my shoulder in the reflection of the store, I could see Mike standing behind me, just standing and staring. I think I jumped a little, probably peed a little. I tried not to make like I even saw him, although I'm sure he knew I did, and hustled to the other side of the store where the same manager who I had told the story to was working. When I told the manager, he ran back to the cosmetics department, but Mike was gone. We later watched the whole thing on camera. That evening, my manager placed a very angry call once again to Mike's supervisor, who told us Mike had quit the week before after being told to stay away from our store. Yikes. You may be wondering why no one called the police at this point, but honestly, it just didn't seem dangerous enough. No one was getting hurt. It was just kind of creepy. That is, until I had finally told my boyfriend about it and my parents, and I stopped driving myself to work. I had developed a bit of a fear of going to my car alone at night. Therefore, either my boyfriend or mom and dad were driving me and picking me up from work. Except this one night. My parents were out of town, and my boyfriend had a thing to go to this particular Sunday evening, so I drove myself. After closing time, I said my see you laters to my coworkers and walked to my car at the end of the parking lot. The parking lot has a river at the end of it, with some benches overlooking the river with zero lights at nighttime. The only lights are the ones shining from the middle of the parking lot. I know, super safe spot to park, right? In my defense, the parking lot was always completely full when I got to work. So I'm walking to my car and I see nothing, and then I hear someone speaking. I immediately recognize it as Mike's voice. He's saying something like,
"Why would you do this to me? Why would you make me believe you wanted me? We had so much fun together."
As luck would have it, the pharmacist that had closed with me that night wasn't yet in his car as he took the garbage around the side of the building to the bin. I yelled, "Jim, wait up a second," and hightailed it over to his vehicle, where I said, probably a little too loudly, "Call 911." The police arrived and scoured the area for Mike, who was gone without a trace. I never saw him again. Number 2. I'm a 25-year-old female, and I do amateur stand-up comedy in my town, and got a lift to a gig at a venue an hour away with a fellow amateur comic. I felt comfortable accepting a lift because I chatted with this dude at a bunch of gigs before, considered him a nice guy, and knew he had a girlfriend. We'll call him Chad. He picked me up on time, and we set off. Almost immediately, things started getting a little uncomfortable for me. We stopped at a gas station 5 minutes into the journey, and he pulled in his car behind this lady putting gas in her tiny car. He kept edging closer and closer until, honestly, I thought he might be touching her car. He yelled,
"What a bitch."
But as the windows were closed, she didn't react. I don't think she had heard. But I felt bad. We weren't running late or anything. Like, WTF, weird, right? But anyway, we got gas and set off. About 20 minutes later, Chad got weird again, asking me what porn I like to watch, how I masturbate, how many guys I've slept with, and other stuff that is fairly inappropriate for the relationship we had. Colleagues, essentially. I'm not one to tolerate things that make me feel uncomfortable, but we were also on the highway at this point, and it's not like I could just walk away. Chad asked some other uncomfortable questions along the way, but we also chatted about regular stuff too. It was about a 70-30 weird to normal ratio. Once we got to the gig, I felt great because all of our fellow comics were there. I did a great set and forgot that when the night was over, I had to get back in the car with Chad to get home. The night ended. I got back in Chad's car after farewelling everyone. It's 11 p.m. I'm tired. I have to work the next day. I just want to get home. So we head along the highway again, except now it's late and dark, and his inappropriate conversation is scaring me. He's asking me sexual questions again. I was thinking about asking him to drop me at the next gas station and calling my parents to pick me up, but I'm not sure how safe waiting at a gas station would have been either. Still on the highway, he asked if I was ticklish. I said no, to continue making it clear I wasn't appreciating this weirdness at all. He said,
"Let's see."
He reached across to tickle me under my arm. As he's driving while doing this, he was reaching across my chest to tickle me and pretty blatantly groping me. I said stop, again not aggressively but firmly, because it's now late and I am scared of antagonizing him. I moved my hands to my chest to try to block his hands also. He ignored my verbal and physical protests and moved to tickle my knee. He moved up my leg too far for comfort, and again I said to please stop. At this point, he stopped, then pulled off the highway to a deserted store, closed and dark, and I thought this was going to be where my assault takes place. But he had just wanted to check if the shop was open. It wasn't. Back to the highway, and I breathed a sigh of relief. About 20 minutes left to my place. I'm hoping I make it home. The rest of the journey had some more uncomfortable conversation, but no touching, and he drove me home. He stopped his car outside my apartment building and leapt out and started walking to my side before I'd even unbuckled my seatbelt. And I really wanted to get out of that car, so you can imagine how fast he moved. I opened my door, got out, and he's so close to me, I'm thinking, should I just sprint to my front door, buzz the apartment, and get my housemate to come down? Just run inside? My key can be sticky, so I was nervous that if I ran, I'd only get as far as my door. As I'm thinking this, he grabs me, wrapping his arms around my waist. He picks me up and kisses me on the mouth, despite my obviously keeping my head turned. He's a big, buff guy, and I'm fairly small. I couldn't get out of his grip. He held me longer, grabbed my butt, tried to kiss me again, but my head was turned too far. He suddenly got back in his car and drove away. I made it clear to this guy I wasn't into his advances, not aggressively, but firmly and in no uncertain terms. All organizers and promoters have been fantastic in supporting me not being on the same bill as this man. I can't fault the comedy community here at all in how I was treated after deciding to be open about what happened. I just didn't want to see this man again, and I haven't. Number 3. It was about 15 years ago. My friend Julie picked me up to go nightclubbing, what we did most weekends. This was one of those giant nightclubs outside of town in the countryside. Julie and I really enjoyed dancing, so no drinking, pulling our best moves and smiling all along. For once, 2 guys seemed interested in dancing with us as well. No funny business. Unusual, but nice and good fun. Come the end of the evening, Julie and I go to her car in the near-deserted car park. These 2 guys tag along. Julie asks them how they plan to go home, and they answer that their group of friends have left a while back, and that
You'll have to take us back now.
I reply that we didn't have to do anything, to which one of the guys pushes me against the open car door and said,
But we're having geese for dinner.
I'm crept out and can't retreat anywhere. Thankfully, my friend Julie closes the passenger door onto the guy's fingers, which made him remove his hand, and I can get away from him. His friend being a lot nicer, Julie gives in and accepts to give them a ride. We were far from town, before mobile phones were that common, and they would have been stranded. Julie asks that both of them ride in the back. They settle in the back of the small car, and Julie starts driving, but after a couple of kilometers, the 2 guys start touching our hair and necks and kept repeating,
We're having geese for dinner tonight.
That's when it clicked. They were talking about us. We were the geese. Julie keeps her cool and casually asks me to put my seatbelt on. The 2 guys at the back didn't catch up with that comment. Julie accelerates, cheered by our passengers, then slams the brakes. As she and I have our belts on, we're a bit shaken, but the 2 guys hit the front seats hard and are in shock. Not thinking, I unbuckle my seatbelt, open the back door, and drag both of them from the car. They just stand there, rubbing their noses. I climb back in, lock the door, and Julie floors it. We shook all the way back to my flat and acted totally paranoid for weeks. We never heard from them again, nor saw them at the nightclub, but one thing for sure, thanks to Julie's quick thinking, we were off the menu. Creepy Mina here of the Worst Nightmare channel. I hope you enjoyed those 3 stories of women encountering dangerous acquaintances. I just want to let you know that beginning next Saturday, for the next 4 Saturdays, in addition to my usual crime-related videos, I'm going to upload a scary or horror story, sometimes paranormal in relation and sometimes not, but you can keep your eyes peeled, so to speak, and look forward to that. Of course, comment below, have you ever encountered a dangerous acquaintance? If you like this video, give me a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't already, share on your favorite social networking platform, follow me on Twitter as WorstNightmare6, and please do your best to stay safe.